Let's get right into it. Number 8. The Lemming Cliff Dive Lie. Back in 1958, Disney made a nature documentary called White Wilderness. They wanted to show these cute little rodents called lemmings doing something dramatic. The problem was, lemmings don't actually do anything dramatic in real life, but Disney wasn't going to let reality get in the way of a good story, so they bought a bunch of lemmings from local kids in Manitoba, Canada. Then they built a weird turntable contraption and started filming. They spun these poor, confused lemmings around to make it look like thousands of them were running. For the grand finale, they literally pushed the lemmings off a cliff while the cameras rolled. It was completely staged. What's even wilder is these scenes weren't filmed in the Arctic where lemmings actually live. They shot it in Alberta, Canada, and they weren't even filming at the ocean. It was just a river. But people actually believed it was real. The documentary even won an Academy Award. This fake scene became so famous that even today, people think lemmings regularly jump off cliffs. In reality, lemmings are actually pretty smart little creatures. They're excellent swimmers and will cross bodies of water when they need to find food. No cliff diving, no dramatic exits, just sensible rodent behavior. Number 7. Pyramids built by slaves. You know that scene in movies where thousands of slaves are being whipped while dragging massive stones up ramps? That's about as historically accurate as saying the pyramids were built by aliens. These massive structures were actually built by skilled workers who got paid pretty well for their time. Archaeologists found entire villages near the pyramids where the workers lived. These weren't shabby slave quarters. They were proper homes with medical facilities and dining halls. They even found the workers' tombs, complete with fancy burial gifts like beer and bread for the afterlife. You don't give slaves fancy burials with snacks for eternity. The workers were organized into teams with cool names like Green Gang and Western Gang. Most of them were farmers who worked on the pyramids during flooding season when they couldn't farm. It was basically their side hustle. They got paid in bread, beer, and other goods that were actually pretty valuable back then. They kept detailed records of everything, from work schedules to food distribution. Archaeologists found healed broken bones that show someone was patching these workers up when they got hurt. So next time someone tells you slaves built the pyramids, just remember, those workers were probably living better than most people in ancient Egypt. Number 6. The Wild West Shootout Myth. That classic movie scene. Two tough guys facing each other in a dusty street, hands hovering over their guns, waiting for the clock to strike noon. That never actually happened. Real Wild West fights were more like drunk guys stumbling around in bars, throwing punches, and occasionally pulling guns when things got really heated. Most cowboys weren't even carrying guns in towns. Places like Dodge City and Tombstone actually had stricter gun laws than we do today. When you rode into town, you had your gun checked at the sheriff's office like it was a coat at a fancy restaurant. The real cowboys weren't the lone white heroes we see in movies. They were a diverse bunch. Mexican vaqueros, former slaves, Native Americans, just trying to avoid dying from the brutal weather or starving to death. Their biggest enemy wasn't some mustache-twirling villain. It was winter. These myths came from something called dime novels. These were basically the clickbait of the 1800s. Writers who'd never even been west of New York would make up these crazy stories about heroic gunslingers. Then Hollywood got hold of these stories and turned them into the dramatic duels we know today. The real Wild West was less about quick draws and more about trying not to die from drinking bad water. Number 5. Unclean Viking Raiders. Many believe Vikings were dirty, smelly barbarians who never saw soap, but those filthy raiders were actually total clean freaks. Archaeologists keep finding fancy combs, tweezers, and ear picks at Viking sites. These weren't just basic tools either. We're talking elaborately carved pieces stored in fancy boxes. It's like finding a medieval version of those expensive grooming kits influencers promote on Instagram. And get this, Vikings had a dedicated washing day every week. The word Saturday in Old Norse literally means washing day. They were so well groomed that English women were reportedly leaving their homes to run off with Viking men. Talk about a medieval dating app success story. The dirty Viking myth came from their enemies who were trying to make them look bad. It's like leaving a 1-star review because someone beat you in battle. 0 out of 10 would not recommend being raided by these guys. They were way too clean and their hair looked better than mine. The truth is, Vikings probably smelled better than the people writing about them. Number 4. Gladiators deathmatch myth. Everything you think you know about gladiator fights is probably from movies, and Hollywood got it wrong. They love showing us arena battles where every match ends with someone getting unalived, but gladiators were basically the NFL players of ancient Rome. These guys were expensive to train, feed, and house. Killing a gladiator was like destroying a Ferrari for their owners. Most fights even had actual referees. If a fighter was done for the day, they could tap out by raising a finger. Only about 1 in 10 matches ended in death. For new gladiators, it was more dangerous, with a 33% chance of not making it through their first fight. But if they survived that rookie season, their odds got way better. Scientists have found healed bone injuries on gladiator remains. That means these guys were getting patched up and sent back into the arena multiple times. They even had their own doctors and trainers, just like modern athletes. Some matches were purely for show, like WWE with swords. The crowd came for the skill and drama, not just the blood. These guys were expensive entertainers, not disposable action figures. Number 3. Pirates' buried treasure lie. That classic image of pirates burying their gold on some remote island is not real. This whole idea came from Victorian-era writers who needed to spice up their stories. Real pirates were more like your friend who gets their paycheck and blows it all at the club that same night. These guys lived fast, and usually died young, with a career lasting 2 to 3 years max. They weren't planning for retirement with a 401k of buried gold. When they got their hands on loot, they headed straight to places like Tortuga and Port Royal. They'd spend their gold faster than a teenager with their first paycheck. Most of their plunder wasn't even gold. It was boring stuff like tobacco and sugar. And here's the thing about pirate crews. They were basically floating democracies. Everyone got their share right after the raid, and nobody was cool with the captain saying, "Let's bury this for later." There was exactly one guy in history who actually buried treasure, Captain William Kidd, but he only did it because he was in serious trouble and needed bargaining chips. It's like hiding your report card when you know you're about to get grounded. That whole X marks the spot thing is pure fiction. Real pirates were too busy living their best lives in port towns to bother with treasure maps. Number 2. Rasputin's undying body. Imagine being so hard to kill that people think you're some kind of demon. That's Rasputin, the mysterious advisor to Russia's royal family. The story goes that in 1916, angry nobles decided he had too much influence. According to the wild tales, they first tried poisoning his wine and food with enough cyanide to drop an elephant, but he just kept drinking and eating like it was nothing. Then they shot him multiple times, but the story claims he wouldn't stay down. Finally, they wrapped him up and threw him in an icy river, but it was mostly made up. The actual autopsy showed something way less dramatic. There was no poison in his system at all. He was killed by a gunshot to the head. So why did this myth get so big? The people who killed him wanted to seem like heroes, fighting some kind of supernatural monster. It made for a better story than "we shot an unarmed man at a dinner party." Plus, Russia was going through rough times. Having a seemingly unkillable dark force to blame everything on was easier than dealing with the real problems. Number 1. Kennedy's donut speech. In 1963, President Kennedy stood in Berlin before 120,000 people and proudly declared, "Ich bin ein Berliner." For decades, people have been laughing about how Kennedy accidentally called himself a jelly donut. The story goes that Berliner is what Germans call a type of jelly-filled pastry. So Kennedy basically said, "I am a jelly donut," instead of saying he stood with the people of Berlin. Yeah, that never actually happened. In Berlin, they actually call those donuts Pfannkuchen, not Berliners. When Kennedy made his statement, every single person in that crowd understood exactly what he meant. It's like if someone came to New York and said, "I am a New Yorker." No one would think they're calling themselves a magazine. The whole donut story didn't even start until the 1980s, when someone misinterpreted a magazine article. This fake story became historical fact because people love the idea that a world leader could accidentally compare himself to a pastry. The irony is that Kennedy's speech was actually a masterpiece of political speaking, but nowadays, more people know about the made-up donut story than what the speech was actually about. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.